Hi Thunkers, this is Simran from Thunkable, and in this series we will be talking about web APIs. So let's start by talking a little bit about what an API actually is. API stands for Application Programming Interface, but keep it short and simple, just call it an API. So what an API does is it allows your app to talk to another data source. The web API component on Thunkable allows you to get data from any public or private data source and use it in your app. So in the description below, we'll be linking a list of the many different web APIs that are available to you, and we encourage you to check them out and see what you can do with them. In this tutorial, we'll be using Yelp's database to create an app that gives us suggestions of restaurants that are closest to us. So let's take a look at the demo and see what this app actually does. Once we open up the app, we'll see a Pick a Restaurant button. So we'll click on this button and you'll see a suggestion for a restaurant. You'll see the name of the restaurant, an image of the restaurant, and two other buttons at the bottom. So if we click on more info, it'll take us to the page of the restaurant on the Yelp website. And say we didn't like this suggestion of the restaurant, so we'll click find another, and it'll give us another suggestion. So for this demo, all we really did was connect to Yelp's database. It's pretty easy to set up, so let's just let Yelp do all of the hard work. So let's get started and start building this app. This app will have two screens. So we'll have a screen 1 and a screen 2. So let's just add in our second screen over here. Let's name our screen 1 to be the options screen. And then we'll name our screen 2 to be the results screen. Great. So the first screen, the option screen, will allow you to find a restaurant, and the results screen will give us a suggestion for the restaurant. So let's start building screen 1, our options screen. So we're going to drag into here all the components that we need first. So we'll put in a label. We can search for a loading icon. So we'll put that underneath the label. And then we'll add a button. So let's just format these as we go. Add a button. So we want the button to go under the label and the loading icon. So for the label, that will just be the name of our app. So let's call that find food. We'll set the font size to be 40. And then the margin bottom we'll say is 85. Great. So next let's work on our loading icon. So we want to start by, let's just make this the color of it red. We want the size to be large. And then for height and width, we want to use relative size. So let's say the height is 20%. We'll say the width is 40%. So now let's format our button. Let's change its name to Pick a Restaurant button so we know what it is. And let's change its text to Pick a Restaurant. And let's do the margin as 50. Great, so that's all we need for screen 1. So let's go to our next screen now, which is our results screen. And again, the results screen is going to be showing the restaurant suggestion from Yelp, and it will have the option of choosing another restaurant or getting more information about the restaurant. So let's start filling it up with the components that we need. The first thing that we need is a label component. So we'll put that in here. We'll need an image component as well. So let's put the label on top of the image. And then we will also need 2 button components. So let's add those in, and then we can bring them underneath the image. Perfect. So let's start formatting these now. For the label, we will just set the font size. For the image component, let's set the height to relative size, and let's do 60% for the height, and then we'll do relative size again, and we'll do 85% for the width. And we will change the image to restaurant image. And we're also going to change the label's name to restaurant name. For the button component, let's keep the font size as it is. We'll rename this button to be the more info button, so that way we know what it is, and we'll change the text to this as more info. And we'll do a similar thing for button 2. Let's call this the reroll button, just because this is what we'll click if we need to change the restaurant suggestion. And let's set the text here to find another. Great. So really quickly, let's just go over what these components are going to do again. The label will show the restaurant's name. The image component will show the image of the restaurant from Yelp. And the first button, the more info button, will show, once you click on it, it'll give you more information about the restaurant, and it'll take you to the restaurant's page on Yelp. And the find another button will, once it's clicked, it'll give you another suggestion for a restaurant. So this is pretty much it for design, but we still have 2 components that we need to add in. So we'll add in the web API component, and this is how we'll be getting in touch with Yelp's database. And we also need to add in a location sensor, so that way we can find restaurants that are closest to us. So now that we have the design all laid out and we have our 2 components as well, web API and location sensor, let's start programming this app. So let's go to our options screen. And again, this is a screen that we'll use to find a restaurant. And let's go to our blocks. For this app, a few things are going to get changed. The name of the restaurant will be changed, the location of the restaurant, as well as the link to their website will be changed. And we don't know what's coming next, so we need placeholders that can just change with the data. So to do this, we're going to use the variable blocks. And how variable blocks work is that they're just placeholders for things that are going to change in the app. So let's start by going into the variable blocks, and we're going to drag out this block here, the initialize app variable name 2. So we're going to copy this 4 times. 4. Great, so now we have 5 variables for 5 things that are going to change. So let's start naming these variables now. So we'll call the first one the object, in lowercase object. And this is just a general placeholder for all the other things that are going to change. The next one we'll call restaurants. We'll call the next one link, and latitude and longitude. It's important to remember that we have both latitude and longitude because we need both in order to get a location. Next, we're going to program what happens when our option screen opens. So when the option screen opens, we want the app to get our current location. So what this means is that we want to get our current location, its longitude and latitude, and make these coordinates the values of our variables here, latitude and longitude. So what we'll do is we'll go into the options drawer. We'll get when options opens, and then we'll bring our location sensor. So here again, you can see in the location sensor that we need both latitude and longitude to get a location. So what we want to do is set our app latitude. We can do so by getting the variable from the variables drawer, set app latitude to latitude, and then we'll grab another one and we'll set app longitude to longitude. Also here, we need to tell the loading icon not to show up yet. So we're going to get the one that says from loading icon set visible to false. So now we're going to program what happens when you click that pick a restaurant button. So let's grab the block that says when pick a restaurant click. And here, before we do anything, we want to get our loading icon. And we want to set that to true. If you want to know more about loading icons, we have tutorials loading icons. So feel free to check them out and see what you can do with them. So now let's call the Yelp database. And the way to do this is go into the Web API drawer, and we want to get this one, from Web API set URL to. To call the Yelp database, what we first need to do is go to Yelp's website. So you can just type in Google Yelp documentation. It'll be the first link. We'll head over to Create App. And here you just want to put in a little bit of information. So we'll say our app is called Find Restaurant. Just call the industry local. Add in your email. And we'll add a short little description. So we'll say this app suggests a restaurant that is close to you. Great. So now we'll click on Create New App. And here you'll see we'll get the API key, which is important because it's unique and it allows you access to the Yelp database. So we'll copy the API key here and we'll go back to the design section of our page over here. And we'll click on Web API. And what we want to do is we want to put in the headers area under property, we'll put authorization. And this just tells Yelp that you're asking for data from them. So in the value box, we need to put this information in a specific format because this allows your app to talk to Yelp. So what we'll do is we'll type the word bearer, followed by a space, and then we'll paste our API key here. Then we're going to click Add, and you should see something like this. So we'll see authorization, followed by bearer, a space, and your API key. That's everything that we'll be doing in this video. In the next video, we'll learn how to use the Web API component to actually start receiving data from Yelp's database. So head on over to that video to finish creating this restaurant suggestion app.